Welcome. Welcome to the second episode of the Vinland Saga reaction series. In the first episode of Vinland Saga, we met Thorfinn, the protagonist of the series, and his family. So the first episode was about his childhood and when he was a very young boy. We learned that his father has the qualities of a leader, so being very rigorous and intelligent also in making decisions. And Thorfinn is a very adventurous soul, always looking out to the sea and asking Leif Erikson. And I at this point I have to apologize for being a bit ignorant on Norse mythology and culture, because for one, Leif Erikson is one of the most famous Vikings there ever was. Traveling, him also being very adventurous and traveling to many different new continents. Also the big serpent, the water serpent, Jormungandir, I think that name was, is also an important part of Norse mythology, and I was completely oblivious of that fact. And the center plot point of this whole series was exposed and laid out in the first episode, which is Vinland, which is also the title of the series, Vinland Saga. But in the beginning I thought it would be part of England, the United Kingdom, in earlier times. But I was mistaken, because most of the time if there is any kind of medium about Vikings, like a series or a TV series or a movie, they mostly focus on England, and so I presumed it was the same for Vinland Saga, but no. And that is also connected to Leif Erikson, because he traveled to North America, so the USA, and discovered it for himself. And it is also Vinland. So at first I was confused, because they were natives, and natives in England don't really fit. So I was wondering if it really was America, and it is. So that is going to be the main plot point going into the future of the series. That's it for the short recap. Let's get into episode 2. Northern England, Northumbria. Viking base. Are they being attacked? They use this opportunity to strike. Oof. They're being slaughtered. The king. Oh, maybe it is an English king, as I said, the one in the opening. All this bloodshed. They think it's a game. That reminds me of if you have read Berserk, And the one arc with the fairies, they also play war as a kind of game. Valhalla, the hall of victors and warriors. If you die in the snow, you'll catch a cold. Makes sense. True. He's also a trader, a merchant. He really doesn't fit the type for a warrior, Viking warrior. Something important. Maybe that's the one we saw at the end of the last episode, the first episode. The one guy with the scar on his face. Oh, it's already here. Didn't expect that. An eye for a symbol. Interesting. They're bowing? Oh, that's Floki. He is an ally. I didn't expect that because of his looks. I thought he was an enemy. They all don't know about him. Oh, Danes. Svein. Oof, yeah, of course they're gonna avenge his sister. It's always for someone dying that they start a war. Someone close. He doesn't want anything to do with it, which is actually smart. Captain. He was or is the captain. So the battle in the first episode at the beginning was 15 years ago? Was it in the past? He's become a settled man with a family to care for, so I can understand if he doesn't want to join this war. It's a very good thing. I like that close-up on the eyes of both characters. That was a nice touch. Those eyes. Maybe it's eyes that I've seen a lot of death and war and suffering. Maybe all of them have those particular eyes. Yeah, they look strong. Strongest army in the Northern Sea. That's respectable. I expected as much, that he was some kind of important figure. Oh yeah. They are all so happy that a war is starting. But a war is never something to be happy about. Never. What made him say yes? Hmm. It was in the past. I guess that's the confirmation. They're ruthless. But actually, to me, it seems starting a family and settling down, living a simple farmer's life, is taking responsibility. At least to me. Yeah, he's very excited for fighting. But my guess is that he's going to die. It's supposed to be a game. Six. He must be pretty strong. He has his father's fighting spirit inherited. They're being too carefree. The chest that we saw at the very end of the first episode, it had some weapons in it. Oh yeah, he found it, right? He's found it. Can you just open it like that? Okay. I thought it was locked or something, that he had to get a special key. That is probably all of his dad's gear when he was fighting. A dagger. Well, it fits his size. But who's the enemy? Who is the enemy? Is there truly an enemy? Has there ever been? He's speaking from my soul. There aren't any enemies. No one to fight. Maybe that is the reason, or part of the reason he seemed so distant when fighting in the war. He seemed so absent from all of it. Maybe he just didn't hold any kind of grudge or rage against the people he fought. Let's call them enemies. Because it is his strong belief that there are really no enemies to anyone. Which is a very profound belief. And actually more than a belief. Oh, the Faroe Islands. Poor man. Just being used as target practice. Jomsvikings. They seem to be very disciplined. Askelat. I like that name. Wait, what is he talking about? Oh, Jesus. And again, wow. Just amazing episode. The first was already great, and this one just raised the bar even more. There is in this episode there was also so much symbolism, especially in terms of war, weapons, people, and especially enemies. But I will come back to that in a bit. There wasn't really that much emphasis on Thorfinn in this episode, but much more on Thors and his past. Because we saw the arrival of the Jomsvikings or Jomsvikings. I'm still not sure, because the town or region they come from was something with Jorm, I think. But whatever, let's call them Jomsvikings. With their, I think now he is the captain, and he was talking with Thors about the old times, the past and the future. The past about his being Thors being the captain of the Jomsvikings and leading them into many battles and into war. And actually there was the confirmation, probably, that the scene in the beginning of the first episode was in the past, not in the future. I believed it to be in the future, but now that has been confirmed that it is in the past. And so we saw the children peeking in, the kids of the village, and they talked about it like they didn't know, and they didn't know anything about Thors, and that he doesn't really talk about himself that much, which is also very interesting. I think that implies that he tries to leave the past behind, and that is also why he fled from the battlefield 15 years ago. I think it was 15 years ago, and started a family. Or actually, because of the flashbacks in the first episode, I think he already had started the family, but Thorfinn was still a baby back then. But wait, that doesn't make sense. No, it was probably his sister, because in this episode we found out that Thorfinn is 6 years old, and if it was 15 years ago, then it wouldn't make sense. So it was probably his sister, and he went back to his family and settled down in Iceland, and to this point led a simple farmer's life. And as I said in the reaction, that was probably a good choice, and the captain, his friend, said that he has to take responsibility, but I said in the act of starting a family and settling down and not fighting anymore, he is taking responsibility. But those are just different perspectives and takes on what responsibility really is. And in the beginning of this episode, we saw Danes, Vikings, being attacked in Northumbria, in their own settlement, and all of them being slaughtered, the children, the wives, all of them. And one of them was the sister of the king of the Danes, and she was also slaughtered. And now the king wants revenge, of course, which is natural. And now they are calling up an army, and of course the Jomsvikings are the core of that army, and they're recruiting other mercenaries and small villages and all of that. And Thors, of course, is an important part of this recruitment. And actually in the end he said yes, and he said that they were going to go with him. But my question still is, what exactly was the deciding factor for him to say, yes, I'm going to fight again, and I'm going to lead my village into the war? And that actually goes against his actions 15 years ago, and I thought that he was settling down for good and not interested in war anymore, that maybe he had to be forced into saying yes. And maybe that was the case. We didn't actually see it happening because they cut away from it. Maybe he was somehow forced to do it, perhaps some kind of extortion. Maybe the captain has something against him that had to make him say yes. We don't know, or I don't know. And yeah, now they're going to war, and that also ties back to the symbolism in this episode, where we saw them lots of times fighting against each other with wooden swords. Of course, that is part of the practice and the practice of fighting, but they also saw it as some kind of game, like a game you enjoy and have fun with. And in the reaction I mentioned Berserk, the famous manga by Kentaro Miura, I think is the mangaka's name, and one of my favorite mangas of all time. And there, in one of the arcs with the fairies, they also play war again with each other, and they are actually, I didn't mention that in the review, but they are actually killing each other and hurting each other with real weapons, not just some wooden swords. But that was kind of a twisted way to show the symbolism of war, and those scenes reminded me of those pages in the manga. Very interesting. And when they received the message that they were going to war, actually almost all of them were happy about it, and they were celebrating it. And the captain, the captain mentioned that they have been spared by the effects and consequences of war, so they've never seen any war themselves in person. And maybe it's also that because they were so excited, they were always training and practicing and playing the war games, and it seemed so much fun that they actually want to go to a real war, and now they have the chance, and so they are celebrating it. But they don't actually know the horrors of war and that's all of the suffering. And my prediction is definitely that they will face the suffering from the very beginning, and many of them are gonna die, and they are not gonna celebrate it much longer. That's what I'm telling you. Definitely. War is not something to be celebrated or to be excited about or to be happy about. It's never. Thorfinn also made himself ready for the upcoming departure from the village, or he was going to, but I don't think he is actually allowed to come because he's only 6 years old. Only the teenagers and the adults of the village are going to go, I believe. And of course he's also excited about it. And then we saw the chest again that was first shown at the end of the first episode. Kind of like it was very a thing of significance for maybe for the whole story even. And then it made sense because it's all of his father's war gear and his weapons and his armor, his helmet, stashed away in the chest. And of course for the father it also symbolizes that, well, to this point he put away all of his connections to war and fighting and all of the suffering, and stashed it away in a far and dark corner where it is not easy to be found. But now it was found by Thorfinn. And that makes me think, if Thorfinn found, well, now we're talking in symbolic ways. If Thorfinn found it, then he will probably also, he is going to be the one that carries the torch of his father, but not in a positive way, but all of the connections to war, he's going to carry that and all of the suffering. That reminds me of the opening where we can see Thorfinn in a short montage grow up, and he looks battle scarred and in rage. Maybe this chess symbolizes this change and this evolution in Thorfinn. We will see in the future. Now the last thing I wanted to talk about just shortly was the leader of some kind of small mercenary group, and I really don't know his name, the captain of the Jomsvikings. Jomsvikings visited him, and he's called Askeladd, or I don't know how else to pronounce him, Askeladd. He seems to be a very ruthless and cunning man, seeing that his men were just playing with a priest, with a Christian priest, using him for target practice. That says a lot about this group and their leader. And he also mentioned that they all hate Christians to the guts, I think he said, or something like that. And they were itching for fighting, that they couldn't go to war again because they were stationed on the Faroe Islands with nothing to do, as he implied. And they seem to be very, well, they are mercenaries, so they are out for war, so it makes sense. Yeah, we will see where this kind of relationship between him and Captain, and also maybe Thorfinn, develops in the future. And also just one more thing about enemies, and actually I said it in a lot of detail in the review, but there's something very profound and religious actually, and I'm not talking about religion in terms of belief, but religion in terms of spirituality, and that is the question. And you can also ask yourself maybe the question: do enemies really exist? Do you have any enemies as a fact? Is that a reality, or is it just a construct of one's mind? Maybe I'll also talk about this topic in a meditation video in the future. Probably I will. It's an interesting topic, but I just wanted to mention it again here in the review. Alright, so thank you for, if you have watched this long, thank you for staying, and I hope you enjoyed this reaction, and I hope to see you again in the next one. Take care and bye.